So my name's James Kelly. I work for the Money and Pension Service, which is an arm's length government department. So what I'm going to do today is we're just going to take you through the services that we provide as an organisation. And there's a slide deck to go with that, which Carly's just kindly uploading at the moment. You can have a copy of the slide deck afterwards. So if you want to write down any notes as we're going along, or take any telephone numbers or opening hours or all of those kind of things, that's absolutely fine. But if you want a copy of the slide deck, we're very happy for you to have that as well. We're just going to do this the traditional way in terms of between Carly and me. So Carly, can I just ask you to move on one more slide, please, from the intro page to page 2? Session is being recorded today, so obviously anybody who's unavailable or tied up can watch back at a later time. As Carly said, if you've got any questions, you can save those till the end. We'll have a bit of a question and answer session at the end, or please put them in the Q&A box or the chat box, and we'll try and pick those up as we go along. So first of all, who are we? Why has Carly invited us along to speak to you today? So as I say, I work for the Money and Pension Service. We're an arm's length government department. Now, not all of you may have heard of us. We've existed for about 18 years. We were set up by Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, the last Labour government, during the financial crash. You might remember the financial challenge that occurred around about 2007. We have a very long title, Money and Pension Service. That's our business-to-business title. If you go to our head office, which is in Bedford Town Centre, over our head office, that's what's over the door. But you'll hear me call us MAPS today, because it's just a bit of a mouthful to keep saying Money and Pension Service. So you might hear me call us MAPS today. Our job, I work with 500 colleagues. All of those colleagues are based right across the UK. Obviously, we have an awful lot in the Bedford and Bedfordshire area, simply because that's our head office and that's where our contact centre is. But we have people based across the whole of the UK, whether they're in the Northwest or in the Midlands or down the South or in London or in Scotland or Northern Ireland or Wales. One of the things we believe in is not just having people located in one part of the UK. We have 2 brands. Money and Pension Service is our business-to-business brand, but a lot of what you're going to see today will have this Money Helper brand on it, one word deliberately. And that actually is the name of our website. And if you give us a call on the free phone telephone numbers that we're going to talk about today and show you how to use, the colleagues there will speak to you about Money Helper. It's deliberately one word because when people go into search engine optimization tools, things like Google or Bing, it's much easier to find something if it's one word. So I'm going to show you what Money Helper looks like today. A couple of things before we get going in terms of looking at more of the detail of that. All of the information we're going to talk about today is free, it's impartial, it's backed by government. It's not the job of myself or the other 500 colleagues that I work with to sell you a service. We're not a comparison site. We're not like Compare the Market. We're not here to sell you a bank product or a pensions product or an insurance product. We're not here to preach and tell you what to do with your money. All the people we deal with across the UK, they're adults. Our job is to give people guidance, give people helpful information in a straightforward way. One of the things you're going to see when you look at our website today is we don't talk in financial services jargon. We don't believe in that. Before I worked for the Money and Pension Service, I've worked here for the last 6 years. I used to handle the relationship between the Money and Pension Service and Lloyds Banking Groups, all the brands of Lloyds, people like Halifax, Scottish Widows, all Bank of Scotland, all the brands that Lloyds owns. Lloyds are a great business. I was very proud to work for them. I worked for them for a long time, for a decade and a half. But one of the challenges that banks and building societies have is sometimes they love to talk in jargon to people, and that's not really very helpful. Pension companies are a bit guilty of doing that as well. So we really try and talk to people in a straightforward way that everybody can understand. A couple of other points on that page before we move on. I'm going to talk to you today a lot about the things that we do. I just want to talk to you straight away about one thing that we don't do. So we work alongside the Department for Work and Pensions, DWP, and they are literally, I'm not exaggerating, about 30 times bigger than us. They're massive. You'll know that they have a DWP office in practically every town and city across the UK. DWP are responsible for paying benefits on behalf of the government. So they pay things like the state pension or universal credit. We might give information or guidance about how to claim those benefits, but we would never pay them. That is DWP's job, and we don't step on their toes. So just something to bear in mind as we're going along. The other point I'd just try and make to you from the get-go is we work really closely with a lot of other government departments. So we work really closely with HM Treasury, work closely with the Chancellor's Office and number 10 Downing Street. Why do we do that? Because we want to get that information out of government that's relevant to people's money queries, their financial well-being queries, their pension queries. We want to get that as fast as we possibly can when things like updates from the government happen. So you'll be aware, for example, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, did the budget not long before Christmas. And when we have a day like that, we spend an awful lot of time making sure we've got all the information from all the relevant government departments, got it onto our website, got it out to our colleagues. So if someone comes and has a call with us or discusses things, tax rates have changed, the benefits rates have changed, the state pensions changed, we know about that straight away. So just when you look at the website today, you can be pretty confident when you're looking at it that it's accurate and it's up to date. We have a team of men and women based at our offices in Bedford who literally every day of the year are working on the website, working on the calls, making sure that the information is accurate. And on a day like the budget day, when we have the budget day in the run up to Christmas, that team will start really early and they'll just work until they've finished. So we're really keen on making sure that we update information as fast as we can. I can't promise you that if Sir Keir stands up as the Prime Minister this afternoon in the House of Commons and says, I'm going to change the state pension rate and I'm going to change it to a new figure, that we'll have that done within 5 minutes. But usually we can have that information uploaded onto our website within 24 working hours. Carly, can we just move on one more, please? So I said to you, I'd explain to you a little bit about what Money Helper is. We have two ways really of engaging with people where we're not face-to-face primarily. We mainly speak to people either digitally as we're doing today or online through things like web chat and email or through the telephone. So we have some free phone telephone numbers and I'll come to those in a moment. But all that information is being provided from and used by our central source, which is Money Helper. So Money Helper, we used to have three money brands, three pensions websites. We had a money website and then we had two pensions websites. And we had that until about 4 years ago, until about June 2021. And it was confusing for people. If you had a money query, perhaps a query about something like a benefit, and you also had a pensions query, you had to jump off one website onto another to get all the information. So what we did is we pulled all that information together onto one big website, and that's Money Helper. Now, when I say a big website, what we talk about in terms of big is size of the website, the information that's within it, and the amount of usage that it gets. So let's start with about how much information is on that website. On average, that website will have about 300 pages worth of content and about 15 or 16 tools. And we're going to have a look at some of that information over the next 20 minutes or so. As I said to you, that information is all updated. It's totally free to use. It's also shareable. We don't lock any of the information down. We want people to be able to share that information with other people that they're working alongside, or family members, or households, or their neighbours. So the information is designed to be shareable. It's all backed by government. What you'll find on the website is you also list some trusted organisations that we work with, many of which you will know. So, for example, we work alongside organisations like Citizens Advice, or we work alongside organisations like Shelter on the housing side, or Step Change Debt Charity. You can see there, I'm naming basically charities. We work alongside about 7 or 8 major charities that work in this space. Why do we do that? The 500 colleagues that we have can't realistically answer every single query from 70 million people across the United Kingdom. That's just not realistic. So those organisations that we have a good relationship with and we feel are trusted partners, we're very happy to support. So one of the things that we do behind the scenes that people don't see is, for example, we provide 70% of the funding to Citizens Advice across the United Kingdom. Citizens Advice are fantastic at dealing with queries that people have when they want to do something face-to-face. And they've got lots and lots of people, and you'll know they pretty much have an office in every town or city across the United Kingdom. Step Change Debt Charity, as an example, are very, very good at technical, detailed debt queries, things like dealing with, say, a bankruptcy or an IVA. So we're not going to step on the toes of those organisations. We're going to work alongside those. So if you go on our website, you'll find organisations like that. What kind of organisations won't you find on our website? We won't put anybody on our website who's what we consider to be taking advantage of people or a high-cost credit lender. I'm going to give you an example. Wonga. Most of you will know Wonga. It did actually go out of business a couple of years ago, but for the previous 10 years, Wonga was one of the most aggressive high-cost credit lenders in the United Kingdom. Very, very high rates of APR that they were charging people in terms of the lending, and giving people emergency loans and then charging them back fortunes in terms of take those loans back, 1,500, 1,600, 1,700% APRs. During COVID, Wonga actually came to us at the Money and Pension Service and said, we'd love to go on your website. And then if people are struggling, they're waiting for the next payment or a pension payment or a benefit payment, they can come and take a short-term loan for us. The answer to Wonga from us was, go away and don't ever come back. We're not interested in putting you on our website, because they're not there to help. They're not like us. They're not like a charity. An organisation like Wonga is there to take the maximum amount of money that it can out of people, very often at a vulnerable time in their lives. So those kind of organisations, we just will not put on our website. Carly, can we just move on one more, please? So what does the website look like? Carly and I have had a couple of sessions before today. I just wanted to kind of visualize that, because I don't want you to just hear me talking about what the website is and what the information is and how you can speak to us. So that actually is one of the introductory pages of the Money Helper website. And you can see there straight away, it doesn't look like a normal government website. I was on the HM Treasury website this morning, got great colleagues, got some good friends who work for HM Treasury. But if you go on their website, it's lots of tiny white writing, black and white writing, very formal, quite difficult to follow, to be honest with you, quite technical. That's not what we're about. So we try and break money down into 8 key topics. And because this is the intro page, it has those 8 key topics on here twice. You can see the royal blue colour, the banner at the top. We always have those 8 key topics. And the topics are benefits, everyday money, family and care, homes. That would include things like paying for your rent, paying for mortgages, paying for lodgings, things of that nature. Money troubles, which would cover things like dealing with arrears, dealing with debt payments, things of that nature. Pensions, retirement, which pretty much does what it says on the tin. Savings, and work. And work is a fairly new section for us. One of the things the government's asked us to do after COVID is we started to support companies when unfortunately they're perhaps doing really big redundancies at scale. So for example, we supported Wilko Wilkinson, who many of you may know, in retail on the high street last year, when they took unfortunately about 10,000 of their staff out of work and put them into redundancy. That section gives lots of information about how the kind of support that people can get, statutory redundancy payments, things of that nature. What we're going to do is we're going to have a look at a couple of those sections today. And we're going to look actually at everyday money and some of the information within that, and we're going to have a look at the pensions section as well. But before I move on from that page, there's just some other points I just want to make you aware of. You can see in the bottom right hand corner, there's the HM government logo. That logo is there very deliberately. Every 90 days, we go out and speak to 15,000 people. We do market research right across the United Kingdom. People in London, people in Birmingham, people in the Midlands, people in the North, people in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, everywhere. And one of the things that they consistently say to us when we go and do that market research is they like to see the government logo on our website. Why do they like to see that? They tell us why they like to see that. It's because they know they're not being sold something. They feel it gives them trust and confidence in the website. So when you work through our website, you'll consistently see the HM government logo come up. The other bit I'd just like to mention to you before we move on is just above that government logo, you can see there's a little handshake sign in a pink colour, and it says Talk to Us Live. We're going to look today, and I'll explain to you how you can, the free phone numbers, our opening hours, how you can speak to us in various different ways. But if you have an engagement with us, whether it's digital or whether it's on the phone, it will always be live. We don't do chat boxes. We don't do AI. That's not what we're about. We're about having what we call honest and open money conversations with people. One of the things about people across the United Kingdom, British people are great at talking about the weather. We just did it right at the start. We talked about how fantastic the weather was for Maria abroad. We're brilliant at talking about things like the football or what's on television last night. But one of the things we're not very good at is talking about money issues, about money challenges. That's just not a British thing to do. 20 odd years ago, I used to work for an American bank, and Americans are totally different. They'll talk about, what their house cost, how much their car was to buy, even how much they've got in their pension fund. They're really, really focused on money in a completely different way to British people or European people. The challenge with that is when you don't talk about money challenges or money problems, sometimes issues build up or it becomes harder to reach out to people and have a conversation. So the people we hire into our organisation, we put a huge amount of effort into hiring people who are good at having conversations and are empathetic. It's no good if someone comes to us, if people on this call come to us, or a family member comes to us, or a colleague comes to us, and they feel they're being judged. It's not about that. When you come and have a conversation with us or engage with us, what it's about is looking at the position now, providing you the best guidance, the best information, and trying to help you going forwards. And the other point I'd say to you is it's not one and done. We're not money wizards. You don't come and just have one conversation with us and everything's straightforward immediately. Often money matters will take 2, 3, 4 conversations. So if people need to come and speak to us several times over a week, or 2 or 3 or 4 times over a month, that's fine. That's the job. That's what we're here to do. Carly, can we just move on one more, please? So I said to you we'd look at a couple of sections today. As I say, there's no way in an hour we could have a look at 300 pages worth of content. We'll be going through one about every 5 seconds. So I agreed with Carly. We'd look at some of the key sections that are really popular with organisations and with people. So when you click on one of the sections, you can see here, we clicked onto Everyday Money, and it turns that section pink in the banner at the top. And then it will break the information down into 2 types of content. On the right-hand side are tools. Now, tools are interactive. What we mean by interactive is somebody can put their details in. Mrs. Jane Smith, who lives at 52 The High Street in Chester, can put her details into one of the tools, and it will give an output just for her, or just for her and her family and her household. So it's specific in terms of what the tool does. For each section, we usually have about 2 or 3 tools. So as I said to you right at the start, on average, we have about 15 or 16 tools. Tools don't take ages to use, but they're going to take a little bit of time to use because you're just going to need to input some information to get a tailored output. So on average, we try and make the tools work no more than 20 minutes. Actually, the longest tool to use is one of the most popular, which is the Budget Planner, which I'll come back to in a moment. A couple of things about the tools. If you use the tools, we are going to ask for some information, particularly where you live in the UK. Do you live in England? Do you live in Scotland? Do you live in Wales? Do you live in Northern Ireland? Why do we ask that? Because the financial services rules change a little bit. There's some significant differences between the 4 nations of the United Kingdom. So we're going to ask for that information. What we're not going to do is strip your data. We're taking the information we need to provide an output and a tailored output. If you do that with a comparison site, what they'll then do is they'll look very actively to take your address, your email, your phone number, your age, your date of birth, sex, lots and lots of information, and then they sell that information onto banks, onto building societies, onto pension companies, onto insurance companies. So that's very valuable data. We don't do that. If you come and use one of our tools, we'll never ever do that. We won't share that information that you provided with us to any other organisation. And the reason we do that is because it's about confidence. You need to have trust that when you come and speak to us and have a money conversation with us, whether it's digitally or with one of our colleagues, that information is going to be treated in a confidential way. Once you've finished using one of our tools, we don't hold your data. So we delete you back out of the system. So, if you go to someone like Compare the Market, I'm not exaggerating, they literally have tens of millions of people's worth of data across the United Kingdom because they work very actively to take that data. We don't do that. We won't share your data or anybody's data who uses our website, even with another government department. If Treasury came to us and said, can we have that data? The answer will be no, because we give them that data. We're breaking our trust and our confidence with yourselves. So those are the tools. As you can see there, there's 3 tools there. The one I just wanted to mention the most, there's a tool to compare bank accounts. Why do we have a tool to compare bank accounts? That's a pretty complex choice. At any one time, there's usually 50 to 60 bank accounts available in the United Kingdom, and getting the best one is a sensible decision. People find that quite hard. So we have a tool that compares bank accounts, all the features, all the fees. That's pretty popular. We have a credit card calculator. Why do we have a credit card calculator? Lots of people use credit cards. We're not against credit cards. They're a very useful tool if you need to go into the supermarket or you're going on holiday or whatever the case may be. But people find it hard to understand the fees. They find it hard to understand the charges. I'm 55. I've had a credit card since I left university at 21. I've had a credit card for 34 years. Even I find it pretty, and I used to work for one of the biggest banks in Europe, and even I find it pretty hard to understand the fees and charges on my credit card. So that's why we have a credit card calculator. But the tool I just wanted to mention the most to you there is actually the tool in the middle, which is the Budget Planner. Lots of organisations provide budget planners, and if you're using a budget planner or you already have a good budget, or people you're working with have a budget that they're happy with, that's great. But one of the things that we know from the research that I mentioned we did right at the start of the call is that about half the population don't have a budget planner or don't use a budget planner. In other words, they've got one, but they don't actually use it. If that's the case, we'd really encourage you to come and use our budget planner. Why do we want people to use a budget planner? We want people, as far as they possibly can, to know what the money is they've got coming in and what the money is they've got going out. We know times are tough at the moment. Inflation's been pretty high for a number of years. Gas bills have been high, electricity bills have been high, food bills have been high, fuel's gone up, in terms of things like diesel or petrol or oil. So all these charges, all the things that people have to pay, council tax, all these bills have gone up. Budget planner is really good in terms of trying to help smooth out and understand what money you've got coming in and what money you've got going out. If you use our budget planner, as I say to you, it'll probably take about 20-25 minutes just to input all the information. It doesn't work like a spreadsheet. What it's trying to do is give you a very visual output for where your money's coming in and where your money's coming out, and perhaps where you can make savings. You know, one of the things we know that when people look at their budget in that way is very often they can see things that perhaps they've forgotten or continue to pay and aren't using. You know, one of the most common things that we see is things like TV packages, things like Netflix or Sky Sports Premier League. If you're using those packages, that's great. We're not the Grinch. We're not here to tell you not to have those things. But very often we notice that when people use a budget planner, they'll spot something that they just don't use anymore. You know, maybe they had Netflix because they love Game of Thrones or another series that was on Netflix, but actually that series is finished and they just don't really use it anymore. And just every month, £10 is going out of their account. Or, you know, they have something like Sky Sports Premier League, which is actually quite expensive, which on average is about £35 a month, and they're watching one game a month. You know, it'd be cheaper just to go and watch that game on a Sky Sports Pass, pay £10 per game, than it would be to pay £420 a year. So what we're looking for in terms of the budget planner is just really those kind of items and to just smooth out how people manage their money. Those are tools. On the other side, on the left hand of the middle column, we have what we call content and resources. In each section, what we'll try and do is we'll try and break down the key challenges, the key topics in a particular section. So you can see in Everyday Money, we've got a section on banking, how to choose, how to use, how to manage your bank account. That links in back to the comparison tool for bank accounts. We have a section on budgeting, how to find the best deals, how to switch, perhaps things like your utilities to save money. Again, that links back to the budget planner. One of the things we're really big on at the Money and Pension Service and on Money Helper is covering off big key costs. So we know for lots of people, buying and running a car is something that they need. They might not live in an area where there's good public transport. They might live in a rural area. They might have commitments or hospital appointments that they need to get to. If so, we know that buying and running a car is a significant cost to people. So we'll provide lots of information about that, about things like car finance, how to cut running costs and maintenance costs. Within each section, what we'll also try and do is cover off things that people find complicated or difficult to understand. So you can see there's a whole section around credit and how credit and purchases work. We understand that people, as I mentioned earlier on, are going to want to use and have the convenience of things like a credit card. That's absolutely fine. But what that kind of section will also focus on is understanding things like how their credit rating works and what to do if you've got problems with your credit. You know, perhaps if you've got a red flag on your credit score, or you've got a CCJ or something that's impacting your credit score in a way that's not great, it'll give you lots of information, practical information about how you can deal with that. We'll cover off things in Everyday Money that people come up against all the time. So that would include things like, perhaps insurance if you're going on holiday, or insurance for possessions in your home. I mentioned to you earlier on that we push back pretty heavily in terms of high cost credit. So if you go into types of credit, we'll cover things like store cards and credit cards. We're not against what we see as mainstream or helpful lending. So if people are using a credit card from a major bank, or they've got a debit card from a building society, or they're dealing with an organisation perhaps like a credit union. We have fantastic relationships right across the UK with credit unions across the UK who provide low-cost loans. Credit unions are expanding very significantly over the last 5 years. They've grown much bigger in size. We're fine with all of those kind of organisations. But as I said to you earlier on, we push back really hard in terms of people using any form of high-cost credit lending. That would include, doorstep lending, payday loans, or short-term emergency loans, or any form of illegal lending. We work alongside the government's loan sharking team to try and make sure that if we feel someone's being taken advantage of, they can intervene in terms of that work. All of that content will either be written content, it might be some slides like we're looking at today, it might be a video. If it's a video, it'll be what we call a bite-sized video. It might be 8 minutes, it might be 10 minutes, it might be 12 minutes long. It won't be an hour and a half long. It'll give bite-sized information, point you to where you can get some extra content and really help with you in that way. And the other bit I'd say in terms of, if you look at things like our videos, is we're not there to preach to people. It's not like someone's speaking to their bank manager and it's very, very formal. It's about having a conversation and getting an understanding of what that particular challenge is and what that particular issue is. That goes back to what we were saying right at the start about we have this phrase about talking about money, about having open and honest money conversations. So that's one of the sections. As I say, there's 8 sections. We're going to look at one of the pension sections in a moment as well. But can we just move on one more, Carly, and then we can explain how people can talk to us. Oh, sorry, I missed a bit on the tools. So just that's fine. It's okay, Carly. That was me jumping one ahead. I just wanted to show you just some of the other tools beyond the 3 that we got on there. So you can see that there's a pension calculator to help people understand more about their pensions and what that might contribute. The budget planner that we mentioned earlier. You can see on all of these, there's a little pink button. You just jump on and it'll take you straight through or hyperlink you through. There's a savings calculator. There's a workplace pension contribution calculator. As I say, we have about 15 or 16 other tools. There's other tools that are quite popular. We have a debt advice locator tool, which helps people get debt advice if they're starting to struggle or get behind in terms of their finances. We also build tools that are relevant to particular circumstances. So I'll give you an example. When COVID happened, we decided and we built very quickly a tool about all the things that were available during COVID, things like furlough rates, things like council tax rebates. Now, because COVID is over and those kind of benefits and access to that kind of rebates policy has ended, we've decommissioned that tool. So we don't leave things on that are out of date. We're really focused on making sure the information is accurate, current, and up to date. Carly, can we just move on one more, please? So that's the website, but we understand not everybody wants to do things digitally. We know that lots of younger people in their teens, coming out of school or college and into their first jobs or out of university into their careers, they tend to be very, very digital. They've grown up with digital. They've grown up with smartphones. They've grown up with iPads and laptops. I'm not from that generation. As I say, I'm 55. First organization I worked in, we had literally 1 computer per building. So I'm from that generation that likes the telephone. So we're very focused on that because we know that people like to have a conversation. They find it more an easy way to engage with people. So if you come and speak to us, we separate our teams and the people who work for us at the Money and Pension Service into 2 teams. First team is Money Guidance. Money Guidance will handle all the queries that you might have about things like banking, financial well-being, debt, arrears, money management, budgeting. And the people who work for us on that side will tend to have come from that kind of world. So they might have worked for someone like Sinners Advice. They might have worked for someone like Step Change Debt Charity. I used to work for Lloyds Banking Group in their customer support team, for example. I used to run a lot of the customer support teams for Lloyds. But we want people who've got that kind of background. In other words, they know what they're talking about. What do we not do? We don't bounce the calls off 10,000 miles away to another country on the other side of the world where people are working off a script. That's not helpful. Those people don't know enough about the UK and the UK finance challenges and the economy and all the things that happen here to really provide assistance. So we don't do that. If you come and speak to us, by law, we're obliged to be able to speak to you in English or Welsh. So every day, we'll have somebody in the contact centre who can speak English or Welsh. We have about 10 other language skills within the call centre as well, but that's our legal obligation. We can always speak to people in English or Welsh. And if you look at our documents online, they're always available in either English or Welsh. Again, a lot of the documents translated into about 10 other languages, but that's our legal obligation. People come and have a type talk conversation with us. People can speak to us from overseas. Why can people speak to us from overseas? If you've gone away for your summer holiday to sunny Mallorca in June, and you have a problem with your money on day 3 of your fortnight's holiday, we don't want you sat there for 11 days panicking, worrying about it, and not doing anything. We'd rather you came and had a call with us and had a discussion with us and got things in hand. You might need to speak to us again when you got back, or you might need to take some actions when you get back to the UK, but we don't want you just sat there letting time tick by. We get a lot of overseas calls, particularly at the obvious times of the year when people tend to travel through the summer months, around things like Easter, half term, over the Christmas and New Year period when people tend to go and see family. But we understand that that's the case. When does that team open? So that team works from 8 in the morning until 6 at night. We're a government department, so we're closed on bank holidays and weekends. I mentioned to you, you can have a WhatsApp conversation with us. That's super, super popular. People from all sorts of different generations. My father, for example, is 80. He loves using WhatsApp. He WhatsApps me more than I WhatsApp him. But we know that by and large, it tends to be younger people who use the digital options with us. And you can have a web chat with us. Again, same hours, Monday to Friday. We do actually open on a Saturday for the web chat. So that team just goes in and does a bit of extra hours on a Saturday morning and through to mid-afternoon on a Saturday. Carly, can we just move on one more, please? Oh, There we go. So that's the money team. That's how you can come and have a money conversation with us. We have a pensions team, pensions guidance team. Who do we hire into pensions guidance? Who do we want you speaking to if you come into pensions guidance? We'll hire people who work for big pensions providers or in the pensions regulation sector. So they might have worked for someone like Aviva. They might have worked for Scottish Widows. I used to work for Scottish Widows a number of years ago. They might work for someone like the pensions regulator, but we want them to have that technical understanding about how pensions work. Pensions are really just a very long-term savings plan with some great tax benefits, but actually they get quite technical. That's really simplifying pensions down perhaps far too much. And they get quite technical, and we want people who've got that understanding of how pensions operate and the challenges that occur in terms of in the pension market within the UK. Separate team, so your separate phone number, you can see it's a different phone number to come straight through to those people. So we want people to be able to go straight through to that pensions team. Again, you can speak to us from overseas, and there's a line there for the self-employed. Why do we have that line for the self-employed? Self-employed people tend to have slightly more complicated and involved pensions queries. So we want to get them straight to that particular team as soon as we possibly can. That team works 9 to 5 rather than 8 to 6. Why do they work 9 to 5 rather than 8 to 6? I'll be honest with you, at the moment, since COVID, on an average day, about 74 to 77% of our calls are money calls. And why 74 to 70%? Why are 3 of our calls money calls before 1 is a pensions call? The reality is times are just really tough, for the general population. All the things we mentioned about going on earlier on, food going up, heating going up, electricity going up, council tax going up, all those challenges create immediate money problems. So we tend to get more of those queries. So the pensions team isn't quite as big as the money guidance team. I don't want you to feel it's small, because it's definitely not. There's a lot of people that are there and they have a lot of knowledge. But that's why they work slightly different hours, and that's why we deliberately separate them into 2 teams. Again, they're closed on a bank holiday and a weekend, and again, you can have a web chat with us and you'll get exactly the same consistency of service. We're really, really focused on that consistency of service and consistency of engagement when you come and speak to us. Carly, can we just move on one more, please? So one of the things I like to talk to people about if you come and speak to us about pensions is pensions are a little bit more of a complicated conversation usually, and you'll get more from your discussion with us if you've just done a bit of prep before you come and speak to us. So what we mean by that is if you've got a specific pension query, it tends to be helpful if you have an understanding of what your pension is worth. People tend to have a number of pension pots, which I'll come back to in a moment, or if your pension has any special features. What we mean by that is an understanding of what types of pension you have. Do you have a defined contribution? Do you have a defined benefit pension? And do you have more than one pension? Nowadays it's very common for people to have a state pension, and then they might have more than one pension from their employers. The days of people just having one pension plus their state pension are starting slowly to go. My parents, I look at my parents who are both late 70s into their 80s. They literally have one pension, their work pension, and their state pension. That's actually quite unusual when people come and talk to us now. It's becoming more and more common that people have pension pots. I'll use myself as an example. I've worked for 3 major banks and building societies. I work for Skipton Building Society, I work for Halifax, and I work for Lloyds. So I have a pension with each of those organisations. I now work for the government, so I've started a pension with the government, and I have my state pension. So I have 5 pension pots. That's not unusual now. Particularly in the younger population, as people go into their 30s and their 40s and move around for work. So we want you just to have an understanding. We're not asking you to the last penny to know what's in your pension, but you'll have an understanding what that might be. In terms of any special features that pension might have, that's just in terms of any protected benefits. And what we mean by protected benefits is anything that particular organisation may give you as an additional benefit. So I'll use myself as an example. I have a Lloyds Banking Group pension. That pension actually has an earlier retirement age than most pensions. It's a feature that Lloyds used to build in. They don't do it anymore, but they built it in when I worked for them. If you come in to have a chat with us, one of the things that we can't do is we can't give you your state pension forecast. There's a separate team to do that. You can see there's no 800 number to go and speak to them. So we just encourage people to do that. And if you're having a pension discussion with us, it's just useful before you come and speak to us, if you're aware of any other savings or investments you've got, and also crucially any debts or repayments or bill plans that you've got to go. And then the final thing we just try and ask people to think about before coming have a pension conversation with us is what you want to do or may need to do if you're looking to stop working, whether that's through age or through ill health. and what level of pension income you'd like to aim for. Pensions queries tend to take a bit longer than the money queries that we've got. And we do have a separate team that takes more complicated queries that they call pension-wise queries, where we give people a 1-hour appointment. That appointment is totally free. It's usually done over the telephone. That's the one thing that we don't do on demand. Those pension-wise appointments, like people have queries that they want to just spend a little bit more time on. We usually have to book a couple of weeks ahead, about 2 to 3 weeks ahead. The reason being, our pensions specialists can only do 8 of those appointments a day. You can see if each one's an hour, they have basically 8 hours of an appointment and half an hour for lunch. So they are quite in demand, those appointments, and just something to bear in mind. It's not a ridiculous wait. It tends to be, I'll be honest with you, a little bit longer in the winter months when we tend to get a bit more demand for pensions queries, and a little bit quieter in the summer months when we tend to get a little bit less demand for queries. So that's just that in terms of that type of information. And just before we open up for calls, I just wanted to just double back in terms of the levels of engagement that we get so you can understand what those are. So Money Helper and the queries through to us, on average, we'll get about 24 to 25 million views of that website, UK views of that website per year. So you can see those are big, big numbers. Through the winter months, we'll probably average just over 2 million. It's about 2 million or 2 million or so. In the summer months, if it's a beautiful sunny June and people's pressure financially in terms of things like their gas and electricity and their heating bills are a bit less, we'll probably average closer to the 2 million or just under the 2 million mark. But you can see those are big, big numbers. Really, the only equivalent website in our world that gets similar traffic to us is Martin Lewis's Money Saving Expert. And I'm sure most of you know Martin Lewis from ITV. We have a great relationship with Martin. We actually go on his show once a month, every month. He comes and helps us with some of our campaigns. He doesn't get paid for that. We don't pay him a penny for that. He does it because he believes in the work that we do, and we have a great relationship with him. But really, in terms of those other big money websites, that's really the only other one that kind of gets that level of traffic on a consistent basis. I said I'd speak for about 40 minutes, and we're at about 10 past. If you just want to move on to the last one. Just like to say thank you to everybody who's come today. I promised I'd open up so we have time for any questions or queries that people had. The deck that we've looked at today, I sent to Carly, and we're very happy for you to share that with anybody within this group that you're in today. It's not designed to be locked down. The only thing I would ask you not to do is just not share that with perhaps the NHS or a different charity, because we cut each deck to what each charity wants or each organisation. So if you had, for example, I look after a lot of our relationship with the NHS. If you had a query from the NHS, I'd ask you just to direct them back to us, and then we'd speak to them directly.
I've got one.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if this is something that I need to ring up and get more advice, probably better on, with your service. But I've just applied for my NHS pension early due to health, whatever they call it. So work has actually dismissed me now because I wasn't in for the past year. So I worked for the NHS, so they've actually now dismissed me. I think I know the answer to this, but when they give my pension's just been approved, like last week.
Sure.
When I get that lump sum, I believe all my university credit stops, etc., because it's then savings.
Yeah, that's quite a technical query, actually. I'd ask you to speak because I'm a generalist. Although I've worked for Scottish Widows and other pension companies, I'm a generalist. I would probably ask you to speak to our pensions team direct in terms of that. I think your understanding is right, but I don't want to quote on that because that's quite a specific query. But yeah, that would match my own understanding, but I'd ask you just to double back in terms of that with us.
So would I ring in and ask to speak to
if you have
to
speak to the general pensions team, they should be able to advise you in terms of that. And it is quite a specific query, that, so that, Maria, they might just ask to put you into an appointment queue for that one, or set up an appointment to have that discussion with you.
Yeah, to be honest, I did do one of those appointment calls a few months back, but I didn't really get much out of it. But I think it's because now things have changed because I have been laid off.
It's trying to get the timing of that right, and I'm sure they'll be willing to do that with you again. Again, you just have to queue for maybe 2 weeks or so. It's 10 days, usually 10 working days that we have to wait for those appointments. But yeah, and I would definitely bring that query into the equation because things have moved on substantially, haven't they, since that period of time? And at that point,
Yeah.
you were talking about a possible situation, whereas now you've
Yeah.
got the actual situation.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of that, Maria, the best way to ask for that is it's called a pension wise. So if you had one before, you can either log on and look at they let you look at the diary a couple of weeks ahead, or you can ring them and,
Yeah.
and just they'll tell you what the availability is, but it won't be on the day. That's the one thing I can definitely tell you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
We did have a question come through on email from a lady. She's asking about drawing a pension. She's 50, she's on treatment, and she's asking about drawing a pension. Now, I know you can't give individual advice, but would that be speaking to the Pension Wise again, or?
Yeah, well, I know you sent that one on to me previously, just to have a little bit of a think about. So that lady was talking about that situation. I think one of the queries that she had within that, Carly, wasn't it, was what would the pension company that she was a scheme member of, what would their approach be to her effectively retiring early due to ill health?
Yeah.
We can't speak for the pension company. She would have to make that query to that particular organisation directly, although many will look upon that sympathetically. So I think there's an aspect there to consider. She would also just need to think about any HMRC, any tax implications. But yeah, that would definitely be the kind of thing that we would encourage someone to come through, have a pension wise conversation, bring the information that I mentioned in the slide a few minutes ago as much as they possibly can. As I say, we're not asking for war and peace, but it just really helps them provide a better conversation with you and better guidance. With the more, it's like anything in life, the more information you have, the better the output can be. So I know, looking at that lady's query, then that is definitely the points we would definitely ask her to think about. We can't speak to the pension company for you directly for data protection reasons. They won't allow us to do that. So probably the best thing for that lady to do will be to speak to her pension provider first. They might need a little bit of time to look at that and come back on that particular query, because again, it's quite a technical query. Once she's got that information, then to perhaps come and have that conversation with ourselves. Bear in mind any tax implications as well. The other bit that we say is if somebody wants really specific advice in terms of that situation, you can go and speak to an IFA, an independent financial advisor, a regulated financial advisor, and they can provide more details as well. One of the things that we're allowed to do, Carly, is we can give guidance and information and options, but we don't, as I say, preach. We don't say you should do this or that. We give you the options. If you want that kind of service where someone says, I recommend you do X, Y, Z, then that's the point you need to think about going to a regulated IFA.
Wonderful, thank you. Anybody else got any questions? Is there anything anyone wants to kind of go back over, or a little bit more information on anything, or is everybody all right with what's been discussed?
I'm scared everyone into silence today.
I think so.
What I would say, and I know it's a lot to take in, and not everybody will know our service, so we'll be relatively new to lots of you that are on the call today, even though we've been around for nearly 2 decades. What I would say is, if you want to get familiar with what we do and how we do it, just digitally, when you've next got 15 or 20 minutes, if that's tonight or it's tomorrow lunchtime as you're having a cup of tea or some sandwiches, just jump on the website and open up a query that's relevant to you, that you're interested in, and then you'll get an understanding of how we provide that information, how we provide that guidance, how we deliver it, and the kind of style of engagement, and how we have these kind of money conversations that we were talking about, whether they're about, you know, council tax or banking or pensions or whatever the case may be. What we find with people is the more they use the website, the more they engage with it. Like anything in life, the more you get confident with it, and the more helpful that you find that information. So that's the only other bit that I tend to add. And the website is built to take huge traffic. So don't worry if it's budget day or a day where there's lots going on. When we joined COVID, on some days we were having spikes of literally 400% when things like furlough rates were changing. It's all on government servers. It's built to take huge traffic. So if you've got a query, we know lots of people like to speak to us verbally and have a telephone conversation. Again, the team there is built to take pretty big traffic. But if you've got a query, just have a look at it that way. And then that might be a way just to get your engagement and build your confidence in terms of the support, the information, the guidance that Money Helper and the Money and Pension Service can deliver.
Marie, did you want to ask something else? Sorry.
Sorry, Megan. So your company then, if somebody's on PIP and Universal Credit, would they say what else you might be entitled to, or what?
Yeah, they can look. We have
out
a benefits calculator, Maria. So that again is a very popular tool. So they can look at that both digitally, or they can come and have a conversation with us. The bit we can't do is we can't define it eligibility, because that's down to DWP. We can tell people what the offer and the options are. But obviously it's down to DWP who makes that decision. We don't make that decision for them. But yeah, that's a pretty common query that we will have people come to us, and not just those benefits, you know, in terms of universal credit or state pension. I mentioned that has to go through the forecast team. You know, we tend to get recently, we've had a lot of child benefit queries over the last year, just simply because the child benefit rates have changed, and who can claim, what the claim rates are, have changed quite significantly in the last 12 months. So if anything new like that happens, we tend to be pretty clued up in terms of that. I use that as an example, but you know, there's other changes that have happened over recent years. But if people want to come to us and have those discussions, yeah, we'll do that. The only bit that we're kind of restricted on is we can only discuss something once it is policy, once it's government policy. So if it's something that's in the media, you know, we got a lot of people ringing us before the two-child cap came off in terms of child benefits. They'd spoken about that in the Labour Party, hadn't they, for weeks and weeks and weeks in the press, and people were ringing up and saying, can we claim? And we were like, well, it's not policy yet. You know, we have to wait for the Chancellor to make those decisions. But so we can't, how can I put it? We can't forecast, can I put it to you that way? We can't presume in terms of what's coming, but anything that's been announced or formalised, we can definitely discuss.
Thank you.
Could I ask a question, please, James? Sure. Thank you, first of all, for an excellent presentation. That really was good. I got a lot out of that. I currently have several bank accounts which I conduct online.
Okay.
My wife's not computer savvy, and I'm looking to consolidate everything, perhaps into one bank account that she can access readily.
Sure.
Do you have any tips for me on ways to go about that?
What I would look for is, in terms of that, is I'd look for, and I've had this challenge with my parents, because my mother's not very good at this. My dad's actually quite good at this kind of stuff, but my mum's not brilliant at this kind of stuff. So if you just consolidate them into one account, if you can, I would look for one major high street bank that can provide you with the widest range of services, rather than a building society. And I've worked for a big building society. I work for Skipton, who's the second biggest in the country. But a bank can just provide you with, legally, with more services than a building society can. They just have a wider range of services. If you have a credit card or any sort of debit card function, it can be useful to have them all on one. That's something I've done for my parents, Steve. So to make it, you're not having to jump off, do you understand, and have a credit card with American Express and your bank account, say, with NatWest. So I would, you know, we're not allowed to specify, but definitely you'll find a bank will be able to provide you with more service than a building society. And it might be worth thinking about bringing your credit card into that same organisation, and then it's all in one. And the other point is to make them aware of that challenge. You know, when I worked at Lloyd's, we had teams of people who literally were there, customer support teams, and they weren't 5 or 10 people, they were hundreds and hundreds of people deep, Steve, who were there to assist in that process, because the banks and building societies and the credit card companies understand that generationally, older people didn't grow up with this situation. You grew up with, you know, branches in every high street of the country and checkbooks in a completely different world. So it can be quite helpful if you speak to the bank and make them aware perhaps of the challenge that your wife has, so they can make a note of that in terms of the records when you choose whichever one it is to go for. And I would choose a UK clearing bank. That's the fine. You know, whether it's a Lloyd's, a Barclays, a NatWest.
We have a Barclays joint account, and I was looking to bring in all the other accounts into that particular one, because we also have the rainy day saver account with them.
Sure.
But I wasn't sure whether it was best to diversify or bring together, but you've now answered that question for me.
I think from a practical challenge, you know, you could say from a safety challenge, it's harder to be fraudulently attacked if you've got separate accounts, because they're just separate organisations. It's as simple as that. But the challenge, I suppose you could say from your side, and particularly from your wife's side, is she might find that difficult access that information. You know, because it's more account numbers, it's more passwords, isn't it? It's more security to clear.
Of course, yeah.
There's a balance to that, and that's why I probably, you know, certainly when I worked at Lloyds, and obviously it's 6 years since I've gone, but I still know a lot of people, a lot of the banks and building societies. You know, we would be try as far as we were allowed to under data law. We would try and be aware of circumstances that you've discussed there, because we, as a bank, wanted to protect the customer's funds as well and allow the best access that is possible. So it's a bit of a balance. Definitely, one of the things I would suggest before you do it is actually just perhaps, you know, narrow it down. You can have a look at what we think in terms of the best bank accounts online, but also just go and speak to the organisation you're thinking of going to and just saying, from a practical viewpoint, this is what I'm doing and this is why I'm doing it. Can you be supportive of that process? Can you help me amalgamate? Can you help bring across any of those accounts?
Yeah.
I think you'll find, certainly when I used to work with Lloyds and Halifax, they were quite keen to do that. And my understanding is most of the major banks are.
I did actually make an appointment with Barclays to do precisely that today, but I've had a bit of a relapse today. I couldn't make it today, so I've had to cancel, unfortunately. But that's excellent advice.
That'll be fine. I think they'll understand that. As I said, when I worked at Lloyds, I'm not exaggerating, we had 2,000 people in the team who were designed to do that, because Lloyds has 30 million bank accounts. So, you know, 2,000 people sounds a lot of people until you think about you've got millions and millions of accounts. But yeah, I just and you know, the circumstance you're describing should not be unusual, certainly to a major UK clearing bank.
Yeah, thank you for the advice. Thank you. Thank you, Carly, for organising all of this.
No problem at all.
Thank you.
Has anybody else got any other questions?
Can you hear me, Carly?
I can. There he is. Yeah. Hiya.
Hi, good to see you again. Thanks, James. Lovely presentation. I've got a friend who lives in a retirement home and she's running out of money. Are you able to answer questions on behalf of somebody else if I was speaking on her behalf?
Detailed technical queries, no, because we'd be breaking data protection unless you could demonstrate that you had the appropriate approval to do so. You may have that, Keith. I don't know whether you've got that or not. Yeah, you know, I'm thinking of something like a power of attorney or something of that nature. But in terms of general terms, we're usually happy to have the conversation. But if you're narrowing down to absolute specifics, then it becomes more of a challenge for us from a data perspective.
It's a problem getting through, or the local councils seem to be dragging their feet. Is there any way of getting around that at all?
Yeah, that is. I know the councils tend to be a bit quite. How can I put it? Trying to find the right words diplomatically. Quite precise, shall we say, Keith? That's the way I can describe it. That I'll be honest with you, that from my experience isn't an easy challenge with the local authorities, because they tend to see things in a slightly different light. I take it you're trying to have a financial conversation with them, Keith, about her circumstances. Is that correct?
That's right. I'll say the lady's in the retirement home. There's like a care manager there who's been in touch with the local council, but it's like treading through a treacle by the look of it.
Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, we don't specifically have a relationship with local authorities or councils. That's not our role. Our kind of financial well-being and money engagement and pensions engagement tends to be more to national government, if that makes sense, DWP, Treasury, people of that nature. I'm afraid all I can suggest is keep wading through the treacle in terms of working with the care manager. If you have some queries you want to take some guidance from us, I don't think we'd have a challenge about that, because you're not going to be asking about specifics or asking us to decide in terms of that circumstance. But yeah, it is a challenge. I know I've had a friend who's just gone through a very similar circumstance with her elderly mother with one of the councils here in Yorkshire, and yeah, that was a big push to get it. They got there, but it wasn't easy, to be quite frank.
I can understand you being Yorkshire.
It was one of the councils up in the Dales. I won't say any more. Smaller councils. They were struggling to just find somebody, I think, more than anything else. It was one of the smallest councils I think Yorkshire has. But I won't name any names, because that's I'm not allowed to do that. But yeah, that's all I can say. If you wanted to have the conversation with us about the financial aspects, as far as we can help, that would not be an issue. But I'm afraid the bit with the council, we can't
Yeah.
influence, Keith. I just want to be really honest with you.
Yeah. Thanks, James.
No problem.
Lovely. If there's nothing else, then let me just see if there's anybody who's. Anybody else who's got any other questions, then I'll let James go and have a breather because I know he's been back to back in meetings today. So
Yeah, that's great. Carly, just from my side, I just want to say thank you to everybody. I'll let you share the information that you've got. And as I say, I know dealing with an organisation for the first time can just, it's a bit of a leap of faith and getting a confidence in us. But, if you don't want to speak to us verbally, perhaps jump on the website or use your smartphone or your tablet or whatever the case may be, or your laptop computer. Just see what we've got there. And just remember, we're there to provide free information, provide free guidance. There's no judgment in terms of you come and have a conversation with us. And we'll be really honest, like I just was there with Keith. If we can help with something, we will say so. If it's beyond our remit, we'll also tell you that as well. And just appreciate everybody coming on and spending the last hour with us. And Carly, you setting up the call today.
yeah, really appreciate it. And like I say, I reiterate, thank you very much for everyone for coming. If there's any questions, then obviously you've got the email address and the details from James. Anything else, you can always drop me an email. You've all got my email address. I'll get this put on the website as soon as I can. Technical issues may delay it a little bit, but I will get it on as soon as I can. But anything in the meantime, then please do reach out and give us a call or drop us an email. So thank you very much for joining us. You can all go have a cup of tea and a biscuit. So Maria, you can have a cocktail, we'll let you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you. Take care,
Thank you.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Carly, I'll just hold on for one moment just to make sure you've got everything.